What if the biggest move Toyota has made in years wasn't a new electric vehicle, a revolutionary battery, or even a breakthrough technology? What if it was something far more subtle and far more important? For years, the automotive industry seemed to agree on one thing. The future was electric. Governments announced ambitious EV targets. Manufacturers invested billions into battery factories, and companies raced to launch new electric models faster than ever before. Anyone who questioned that future was often dismissed as being behind the times. And yet, while the rest of the industry was sprinting in one direction, Toyota appeared to be moving differently. Critics called the company cautious. Some called it outdated. Others warned Toyota was risking its future by refusing to fully commit to an AY electric strategy. But despite the criticism, Toyota continued following its own path. And now, that decision is starting to attract attention for a very different reason. At first, almost nobody noticed what Toyota was doing. The headlines were dominated by EV launches, battery announcements, and bold promises about the end of gasoline-powered transportation. Compared to those stories, Toyota's actions seemed surprisingly quiet. There were no dramatic declarations, no promises to abandon every other technology. Instead, Toyota kept talking about flexibility, multiple solutions, and the reality that not every market was the same. It was a message that sounded far less exciting than the promises being made elsewhere. But beneath the surface, Toyota was making a move that would eventually force the entire industry to ask an uncomfortable question. The reason this move mattered wasn't because Toyota rejected electric vehicles. In fact, the company continued investing in EV development and future battery technologies. The difference was that Toyota refused to bet everything on a single outcome. While competitors were building strategies around one vision of the future, Toyota was preparing for several possible futures at the same time. That distinction may seem small, but it would become increasingly important as the industry evolved, because the future rarely unfolds exactly the way people expect as electric vehicle adoption accelerated. Manufacturers discovered that some challenges were proving more difficult than anticipated. Building millions of EVs required enormous investments, complex supply chains, and massive quantities of battery materials. Charging networks expanded, consumer demand grew, but not always at the pace companies had predicted. In some regions, EV sales surged. In others, buyers hesitated. Suddenly, the transition looked less like a straight line and more like a complicated balancing act. And this is where Toyota's position started becoming much more interesting. For years, Toyota argued that different markets would require different solutions. The company believed that hybrids, plug-in hybrids, electric vehicles, and even hydrogen technologies could all play important roles depending on local conditions. At the time, many critics viewed this as a lack of commitment, but Toyota saw it differently. The company believed flexibility was an advantage. If one technology advanced faster than expected, Toyota wanted to be ready. If consumer preferences changed, Toyota wanted options. And if the transition took longer than many forecasts predicted, Toyota wanted products that could continue serving millions of customers around the world. Then something unexpected happened. Hybrid demand remained remarkably strong. While much of the industry's attention focused on EV growth, millions of consumers continued choosing hybrid vehicles. For many drivers, hybrids offered a practical compromise. They delivered better fuel economy without requiring charging infrastructure. They reduced emissions while maintaining the convenience people were already familiar with. And because Toyota had spent decades refining hybrid technology, the company was uniquely positioned to benefit from that demand. What once looked like a temporary solution was suddenly becoming one of Toyota's biggest strengths. But this only matters once you see what happened next. As some automakers began adjusting EV production targets and rethinking investment timelines, Toyota's strategy started looking less controversial. Analysts who once criticized the company began taking a closer look at the numbers. Investors started asking new questions. And competitors found themselves facing a reality that few had anticipated just a few years earlier. The market wasn't rejecting EV, far from it, but it was proving that consumers wanted more than one choice. And Toyota had spent years preparing for exactly that possibility. The most surprising part was that Toyota never needed to declare victory. The company simply continued executing the strategy it had been following all along. While headlines shifted from one breakthrough to another, Toyota focused on profitability, reliability, and long-term adaptability. It wasn't the loudest strategy in the industry, but it may have been one of the most disciplined. And as market conditions continued changing, that discipline began attracting attention from people who had previously dismissed Toyota's approach entirely. What makes this story fascinating is that the move itself wasn't a single announcement or product launch. It was a decision to resist pressure, a decision to avoid following the crowd, a decision to prepare for uncertainty instead of assuming the future was already decided. In many ways, Toyota wasn't betting against electric vehicles. It was betting against certainty. And that may be the most important difference of all. The question now isn't whether electric vehicles will continue growing. They almost certainly will. The question is whether the future of transportation will be dominated by one technology or shaped by several technologies working side by side. Toyota made its move years ago. Most people simply didn't realize how significant it was at the time. But as the industry continues evolving, that move is becoming harder and harder to ignore. And if Toyota's right, the companies that focused on one path may eventually find themselves adapting to a future that looks very different from the one they expected. And the deeper you look, the more unusual Toyota's position becomes. Most companies are forced to make massive bets. They choose a direction, commit enormous amounts of capital, and hope the market follows. Toyota chose something different. Instead of betting everything on one future, it built a strategy designed to survive multiple futures. At first, that approach looked conservative. But in an industry where billions of dollars can be won or lost based on a single assumption, flexibility can become a powerful advantage. Consider what happened over the last few years. Consumer interest in EVs remained strong, but expectations began colliding with reality. Charging infrastructure improved, yet many regions still struggled to keep pace with demand. Battery technology advanced, but affordability remained a concern for many buyers. Governments pushed ambitious targets, while consumers continued making decisions based on convenience, cost, and practicality. The transition wasn't stopping. It was simply becoming more complicated than many early forecasts suggested. And every time a new challenge emerged, Toyota's diversified strategy appeared a little more relevant. What's interesting is that Toyota never framed its argument as a battle between hybrids and EVs. The company repeatedly emphasized that reducing emissions was the goal. The disagreement was about the fastest and most realistic way to achieve it. Toyota believed millions of drivers could lower emissions immediately through hybrid technology rather than waiting years for infrastructure, battery supply chains, and affordability challenges to be fully resolved. Critics disagreed. They argued that focusing on hybrids could slow the transition. The debate became one of the most important disagreements in the modern automotive industry. But while people argued, Toyota kept selling vehicles. And this is where the story starts to become uncomfortable for some of Toyota's competitors. Because while many companies were investing heavily in future demand, Toyota continued benefiting from present demand. Hybrid sales remained strong. Profitability remained healthy. Customer loyalty remained high. Toyota wasn't chasing headlines. It was serving customers who wanted practical transportation solutions right now. That distinction may not generate the same excitement as a revolutionary product launch, but it has proven remarkably effective. Investors began paying closer attention to execution rather than promises. For years, growth projections dominated conversations about the future. Suddenly, profitability, margins, production efficiency, and customer demand became equally important. Companies were no longer judged only by what they planned to achieve. They were being judged by what they could actually deliver. And Toyota's reputation for discipline started becoming a major advantage. The same caution that once looked outdated now looked increasingly strategic. The fascinating part is that Toyota's move may have less to do with technology than with understanding human behavior. Industry forecasts often assume people will adopt new technologies as soon as they become available. Reality is rarely that simple. Consumers care about price. They care about convenience. They care about reliability. They care about whether a product fits naturally into their lives. Toyota recognized that transitions happen gradually, not instantly. Instead of asking customers to completely change their habits overnight, the company focused on offering options.